Like a video game isn't gonna, a developer and a publisher is likely not going to force you too hard to do something that you don't want to do when you are enjoying a game as it is. Not all developers, and especially in a live service model, which includes PvP games. In a live service model, the idea is to form habits. So constantly introducing design choices that break that habit will detract from the retention of the game. So for example, if the next module they decide to rework the combat in Neverwinter, it's going to detract from everything. It breaks the habit. It breaks the flow. Like, you have to relearn everything. While for developers, at least from my perspective, if I was a developer, I would love to constantly know that my community that supports my game is open to constantly being challenged, but they aren't. Not in a live service model. To retain players freely, voluntarily, and comforting, they tried to introduce changes at a slow enough pace that it feels similar, but not abruptly difficult. It's great for the business model and for the collective, like for both community and the developer. It means the developer doesn't have to creatively stretch from their great points. It's less financial risk, so it's great for the executives, and the community feels comfortable at home. That's when you step outside of live service models. You have games. They still take that risk, but they also subtly don't take that risk anymore as well. It's so pervasive that it's good to feel comfortable in a game series. Like if a franchise has a sequel, if they go too new, right, it breaks the habit, it breaks the mold, and that is a financial risk. It's also creatively challenging though. And ultimately, that type of lifestyle, gaming lifestyle, no longer exists right now. Like, it rarely exists unless you're in the indie scene, right? But what happened to gaming has changed due to online presence, like the living space, especially the live service model. The live service model is ironically telling you about something about the youth of this day and age, including myself, like those who embrace it, is that habit formation leads to high retention, not new things, not challenging things. So games, ironically, okay, bear with me, this is going to be a deep cut here, and some people might argue from a pragmatic standpoint, and I understand these counter arguments, but psychologically, games are easier to the people who self-select themselves into a game. So when you get the choice, video games is a huge industry now. You'll always have a choice that you choose voluntarily that is likely going to cater to you. That choice you made is the easiest possible thing you are willing to accept as a challenge. The greatest challenges are the challenges you don't see coming. Like, it's pale in comparison to not having a choice. So back in the old days when video games were difficult to make, unpredictable, lack of choice, you get what you see. It's hard because you've never done it before, right? That last point is really big because video games have bootstrapped so far now that there's rarely novelty that you'll see that doesn't have legacy anymore. And legacy skill carries a lot of the comforting feeling. So it's always like, I would argue a successful title tends to be 60% legacy, 40% novelty. And I think it's shrinking as the years go on. The old school stuff is you play a new game, you just don't know. You learn from scratch. It's gone. You know, like you learn from scratch. It's always learn from scratch. It's like, I can absolutely hate this game, but you have to learn from scratch. That's how it works, right? Now the gaming industry has stand the test of time to the point where generally people will make choices based on their legacy skill. So, oh yeah, you play PvP games, you're gonna look for the next PvP game, right? Instead of, I've been playing video games for 6 years, now I'm gonna go read a book. And you still choose to read a book, right? But here's a hot take, I guess. Oh, you played video games for 6 years. I'm going to give you the book you need to read and explain to me. That's a challenge. We're no longer challenged. Like, I mean, even myself, I'm guilty of pre-selecting. D&D has always been about hanging out with friends. Regrettably, even as someone who's not integrated into D&D lifestyle, I know a lot about psychology when it comes to game theory and how to collectively promote a game when it comes to community. I would say that it has not always been about hanging out with friends. In fact, I would say a vast majority, like a good significant body of people, play just for the mechanical satisfaction, not necessarily hanging out with friends. So even nowadays, because of the pervasive need for what you just said, Neverwinter PvP or PvP in general, it's not that anymore, which I get where you're coming from though. D&D used to be about hanging out with friends because that emotional tether makes it so that whatever the campaign is, you know, like however the campaign, it can stink, it can be great, what happens is you are together, right? You are together now. It's no longer it's like fading away. Like that type of style is fading away. Now people are playing for like accolades and merits, and it have become less and less about how to measure value of people. And because of the machining of this type of system, which I'm about to talk about, I really need to talk about this though, but I really appreciate the sentiments. I love the idea. I still keep the whole D&D being about hanging out with friends at heart. The trends are just not focused on that right now. Perhaps in the future it will be again. You know, there's gonna be a pushback or something. And Neverwinter PvP is now effectively only propped up by the ability of, by that idea of hanging out with friends, because there's no reward, right? There's no reward for it. So that's nice. It also goes back to the whole clique thing. Back then it was a clique society. So when you say your group, your friends, it's not concerning any stranger you've ever met. Like you telling me this is not offering me anything. You're not being conscientious to someone who isn't your friend, your group, your clique. And this digression came from Worm specifically trying to break into an in-group from an out-group. So as much as there are pros to always hanging out with friends, there's also a drawback that makes it not as exciting for a live service model, not as exciting for PvP. So any model that goes with my group, my friends, I need emotional investment, means also less money, less casual friendly, less accessible, and less lucrative. So when you say Fortnite is about hanging out with friends, it's not. The predominant group it's about performing. You know, CSGO, like CS2, I guess it's called CS 2.0 now. Things like that. League of Legends. You kind of, it's like 60 the other way now, as opposed to 60 in a reverse way. So if you hold on to the friends, always hang out with friends things, it also means that you have a lot of great friends around you. You have a great support system. But it also means you don't care about anyone who isn't your friends. You care about them way less. That's the trade-off. You can be very good friends. You can have a really strong group that always hangs out because you sideline everyone who's not in your circle. And that's one of the cryptic problems per se right now. Conflict of interest. The community in Neverwinter wants to preserve the friends only, I want to hang out with friends mentality, while Cryptic has a publisher, and possibly some people in Cryptic, that want to embrace a live service model. A live service model gets wrecked, absolutely wrecked psychologically, philosophically, by that we only hang out with friends thing. Live service models thrive on making all the possible conveniences and designs so that anyone is accessible regardless if they know each other or not. Because you're occupying a space. You're occupying a platform that strangers go in and out of, like the grocery store. Yes, you can hang out with just your friends and go to the grocery store, but there's a lot of people who also go to the grocery store. And most of them would argue that, or a good chunk of them would argue, they didn't go to the grocery store to hang out with friends. They went to the grocery store to buy groceries. So that's kind of the thing. And I just somehow made an analogy to Neverwinter as a grocery store. Alright. That's a good digression. I'll probably wrap this up somewhere and post it on my channel. But now let's get to the review, right? All the stuff I said, I'm trying to bring it back to Neverwinter because it's a good transition title that goes from the World of Warcraft days, where it's about friends, to the live service model. Neverwinter has been around for so long, and I've been there since the beginning. From a day of hanging out with friends to a day of who's the best pain giver, right? Who has that gear set that makes them elite, as opposed to, oh, you know, we work together really hard to get these things. They're the transition now. And what can I first say about Demon Web's Pit? I think Demon Web's Pit, the module in terms of design, I would say it's a great change towards, if the goal is to become a successful live service model, like a growing sustainable live service model, I think they have a lot of the things that meet modern standards. I think, and by modern standards I mean currently the existing models that are working really well, they are catching up to those. They are checking those boxes. I will highlight some of the unique things for Neverwinter, and they have pros and cons or whatever in a bit. But one of the things that are very great in terms of live service is habit formation. I think we're just gonna settle on habit formation. This is where this module got extra points. The previous model, I think I gave it a 5 or a 6 because it's slightly above average of what they typically do. We're talking about even higher than that in this one. So to promote habit formation, typically it requires microtransactions in the mine. So if you can't get people to want to pay incremental things to get a dopamine response, the idea is to create the habit formation where it feeds you on a carrot on a stick a lot of times. So that, in terms of design, that goes with the campaign layout. So all the repeatable, like I would say 90% of the repeatables are paired up or runs a circuit. That's bonus points. Because when you get used to running a circuit and it stacks on that circuit, it's kind of like running a mile, then running a mile and a half, running 2 miles, running 2.5 miles over time. So that's awesome. And they are building on it 3 modules now where you can see the constant layering. So the circuit building is great. So the literal input is above average. The input part where you get your quests, your weeklies, how do the weeklies lay on top of the dailies, and how it leads to the necessary progression. So it's like one full loop, done, and they're always paired up. And a lot of the designs also are player unique, so you don't have to fight for it, right, in the campaigning area. In fact, some of them are not even instance unique, or like they're not instance singular instance. You can layer most of them. There are a few in here that are still old school where, yeah, if it's crowded, you want to move to a lower crowd, but that's minimum. So that's above average. So in terms of like repeatables, weeklies, in fact, the campaign tokens, you have 2 or 3 more approaches now that take the weight off of any specific one. So like the last module, there's a heavy weight on elite elimination, right? This one, it's semi-distributed, so it feels so natural, like these things completed itself as you're bootstrapping through this. So it's incredible. That's one of the highlights for the live service. Like, I think more layering on top. Now, this is also a very slow process. So one of the glaring live service model issues probably is that largely everything ends by the 5th milestone. So anywhere from week 6 and on is repetition, right? It stops adding one step above. And generally speaking, I'm guessing at some point their development cycle will include trying to get to that stretch goal of 10 weeks. At the moment, it feels like your standard, it feels like the average 5-week stuff, like the old school, like these things where it's like 5 to 6 weeks. However, they're putting in more systems like the boons and the redeemables that causes the stretch to 10 weeks. And you can see that it's getting closer and closer. In fact, last module, I want to say it's around 5 weeks. Module before that, which is North Dark, 4 weeks. Then the experience pretty much stagnates, right? So it's getting closer. So it's an admirable attempt, but it's also slow growing. It's not jumping in leaps and bounds, but slow and steady, I would say. In terms of the rewards, pretty standard. I wouldn't say anything really stuck out except very specialized things that I mentioned before about like the support gear and whatnot. I think the one thing I have to highlight here I'm just going to try to highlight something that I think it's pro live service and something that is a developer's choice. So one thing that is pro live service when it comes to gear, rewards, we'll lump them together for now because I want to keep this slightly short, is that it's a good mix of gear. But live service models, one thing that is not very friendly with habit formation is the idea that tools, which is primarily gear, and maybe rewards and resources. Tools prevent habit formation. If you put a gate on tools, it leads to lower retention, and in fact probably reduces playtime in general. So what I mean by this is, and this is a designer choice, I'm pretty sure this is a developer's choice, to try to retain the old school MMO kind of thing, you know, like the one take expansion type MMO stuff. And that's the idea that the heavier, the consistent half measures, basically it's one of the pros I would say is it's great that they're tiering the system so that you can mechanically complete or without dealing with scalar improbability, right? Like mathematics. So the idea of introducing a second tier called advanced does that. However, when the trade-off here that's anti-live service is the idea that you gate tools. So what I mean by tool gating is something of an older model, like World of Warcraft model, where gear and proficiency are not running parallel to each other. Progression is only measured with successful completion and acquisition. So what I mean by this is the gear gating relies on completion. It doesn't rely on skill development. So live service models tend to thrive on skill development, which can be interpreted as habits. Habits are skills you repeatedly do. They become habits when you no longer actively focus on improving them because they became a habit. They become complacent. However, you can turn that into a skill by using a design that promotes habit formation on something that is tied to progression, not to completion. So the old school model, which they keep in line, is things like, we're not going to review the gear. The gear is, and 99.9% of people, I've already highlighted here and there throughout the weeks. However, I want to talk about what is largely not in the same resonance as live service, and that's tying gear, which are the tools, to forming a habit, to completion of very specific dungeons or trials or tasks that are quote unquote difficult, but you work to complete them. And the rate of completing them gives you access to these tools. What does that do psychologically in a live service model? Well, just imagine this. You play a game out of habit, right? Say you go to the grocery store and someone else goes to the grocery store. That other person wants to buy a loaf of bread. It's like the great loaf of bread, right? Like the one that they want. But they can't because they have to complete something before they can use that bread to further their grocery store habit. So what I mean by this is your tools that you spend, I imagine the developers spend a lot of time and they enjoy making these tools, will likely never or even be sidelined because they're behind a completion wall. When you place things behind a completion wall in a live service models, not only do they become irrelevant, they are underappreciated, and it's a lose-lose, in my opinion. What happens is those tools become optional. And when they're optional, a live service model would suggest that they have less choices. So rather than focusing on rewarding tools, especially unique tools, for completion, you offer things that deal with merit and performance. So how does this look? Well, you offer all the tools up front, right? And the completions are based on performance. How do you get performance in here? Well, there are many ways. I think the most obvious way that other live service models like focus on is performance metrics, right? How have a working history, like if you hit C, these are all deep dives and there is very unlikely to ever show up in the future of the game. We're just discussing hypotheticals, right? So when you see, like say there's going to be a tab that says dungeon completion time and the stats on them. How many deaths, average deaths, I don't know, average damage, average mitigation over the history of the life of a character. Provide filters that deal with the last 30 days in dungeon runs. What did you do? That type of thing. And it will be viewable by someone else. You inspect someone and you click on stats tab or something. Not this type of stats. This type of stats should be incredibly accessible, like flexible in many ways. Like the tools that you are given should be given for flexibility. So when I go out to my front lawn and decide what to do with my front lawn, I have all my tools, as in all the gear, all the unique modifiers, and I choose how to make my lawn the way that someone can see. And my lawn speaks for itself. So in a live service model, when you want to produce a habit of staying in your game, staying engaged in your game, you offer all the tools. And then you measure what the player can do with the tools. The moment you start making live service models as a completion-based task, it becomes a 0 and a 1. If you can complete it, you'll try to do it. If you can't complete it, you're leaving. On the internet, when you see a #1 basketball player and you're thinking, I want to become a basketball player, and the game says you must become #1 basketball player in order to get the tools to be a #1 basketball player, you're not going to. In fact, you won't even start to make a habit. And when I mean you, I mean, I would say 70%, like 7 out of 10 people will see the end goal, and they will, in this day and age, they will look and say, it's that feasible for me. No, I'm out of here. I won't even try establishing a habit. I would say 25% of the people will say, you know what? I'm going to start working on this, form a habit, and see where it takes me. And if I never get that, it's fine. I developed a skill. That's not what the internet is enriching for, especially live service models, right? When you're eating something, you get to choose, oh, I'll just eat the same thing that I like to eat so I consistently can be fed and continue doing the thing. Or I can try all the other options that I have to either go up or down. Not, oh man, half these foods I want to try are too expensive. Monetization, so expensive. That's one of the gates for completion in this. Exclusivity, basically having friends and groups and whatnot, that closes off that habit too. And consistent completion, so zeros and ones, either you complete it or you don't. It's full stop. If you don't complete it, you get nothing. These are easily one of the biggest gates to live service models, because it also means that it makes the gamer feel like you are not invested in enabling them in game. So this design, this linear design of constantly putting the most desirable modifiers and unique modifiers in the game will constantly reinforce thinking your game predicates on exclusivity, elitism, clicks, having people who are already competent and have legacy in the game. You are not promoting a game that wants to grow and constantly be accessible to people. So that's a development. That's a developer's choice, though. So I can appreciate the old school theory behind pushing people to desire things, to complete things, right? This is that contrast that we're talking about nowadays. Games now, the standards pander to the people. It gives them all the tools so they don't feel like they got hamstrung because of where they start. So it's the same as saying like, dude, you're not tall enough to be a good MMORPG player. It's like, why can't you have to be like those guys who've been playing all their lives? You're never going to catch up to them. Or they were born taller. Sorry, they had better tools than you. And you know what? They're going to continue getting better tools because they're already ahead of the game. You no longer foster creativity or equal entry. A great example of that is PvP. What is the first comment that most people say in the popular PvP things? Even playing field. From start to finish. It's only you that differentiates the even playing field. So when you try to turn an MMORPG into a sustainable live service, making modifiers unique to the people who are already ahead of the game all the time means the people who are ahead of all the game will become farther and farther apathetic about being inclusive, and all the people who are potentially investing or want to invest, and that's not all the people, by the way, I'm specifically citing specific groups of a bigger subset, so I'm not saying everyone. I'm citing the people who are interested in this game to start this game will not likely be have the opinion that they have the tools to catch up, because all they see, generally speaking, are legacy players that are perfectly content with their group of friends, their group of people, their group of legacy, and their ticket is being themselves, and they fully deserve that. They get loyal benefits for sure for following the game. They should be reminded that they played this game for many years and with friends and whatnot. It's not to say that there's no alternative. You can still alternatively provide all the tools to everyone, and how you use those tools become a measure of your merit and your legacy. And that has been receptive to some extent with proper metrics. So what I mean by this is how fast you complete a dungeon is like the pretty low hanging fruit. And then statistical averages over 30 days. All these data can be stored and have already been stored by most people who are interested in there for themselves. But having these tools, I love seeing the weapon modifiers, but I'm not gonna, even I don't have the encouragement of going out of my way to bootstrap completion of this. Like, completion is one out. If you keep completing, if you keep expecting live service models to recruit players who want to do high completion tasks, it's incredibly psychologically dissonant. Like, they want to do this often, successfully, consistently, so they can keep inching up slowly. You gave them a staircase that is like a wall that's, I don't know, for you metric folks, I guess we'll say 10 kilometers high, as opposed to, you know, a step you can actually step up to it. There's no step to this thing. It's that imagination that is held over from old school designs where figuratively, there's a step, right? Every time you practice and you fail, you're getting closer and closer to the goal. It's like, well, nowadays, it's not only figurative. I mean, it's not just figurative, it's literal. Your systems have to be designed to literally do that. But I'm going to go one step further, and it's my hot take. Slight, I guess, wishful thinking, or if you call it an alternative, because I already play games like this that do this already. And if where they're going is to try to keep up with the competition, it's about performance. You change your things to reflect performance. Performance makes the players self-motivated to constantly strive for more. And that comes with working towards a comprehensive way of demonstrating that, be it titles, statistics, like I don't know, even vanity, like fashion items that are unique to a specific form of performance, and free game on tools. In fact, it would free up the creative process so much of how to design power creep. You don't need power creep anymore. You can flex your creativity on modifiers and whatnot, because now it's about developing as many tools and play styles so that the largest array of players can form a habit playing this game. The most successful MMORPGs that are live service are, without a doubt, focus more on giving the most tools so that they stay and they can refine their own tools. Unfortunately, especially the patch that happened during this module, where they try to create more stringent controls, right? Yes, that does reduce the playstyle, but stringent control could also help normalize all the playstyles so that it's kind of, it's a give or take. But ultimately, a lot of times it just seems like holding on to trying to balance the completion thing, right? And gating things is so antagonistic to live service. Like, I even say veteran, you know, like the established community would even say gated. It's hard to sell gated stuff. But they are in the privilege. So those groups don't even think about that the things they love about being privileged is also gated. This gear is gated. Actually, I would say when it comes to gear, most live service people don't even look at the gear. Or like the people who are truly going to stay for the live service part will not even look at the gear anymore. Because you have fostered a design that they're irrelevant. Their live service upkeep means completing the campaign, right? Because it's compartmentalized. Cryptic still wants to hold on, which I respect, hold on to the old school D&D thing, where we're not really D&D actually, the old school World of Warcraft thing, because this actually differentiates from D&D, in my opinion, in its spirit. D&D allows success to look like success, but in the way of the player's choice. They die by their choices. They succeed by their choices. And their choices is bound by how much tools is within themselves. Neverwinter embodies the old school World of Warcraft and arguably even Final Fantasy XIV way of life, where the tools is the privilege of those who have been able to master the limited things, the restraints, and quote-unquote restraints being the challenges that are placed on the people to get those tools. So, but Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft, they're subscription-based games. Now, you could go further and say, like, so Destiny, right? Destiny still does it. They still do the completion-based task, and Destiny is not a subscription-based, but they sell expansions. Live service models don't do that anymore because it conflicts with the psychology. Live service models, you get all the tools. And then, hey, guess what? To keep you guys playing, we're gonna create all the modes possible to keep track of your character being unique. Not even completion is unique. So like, oh, have you completed Master Temple of the Spider? Well, I have. Oh, you have? Can we even tell? Well, here's the gear to tell about it. It's like, oh, so now you're saying we need the gear to show that we completed it. Then what's the gear for? Like, well, it's just to show that I'm better than you. Like, well, okay, well, if you're better than me, I'm gonna go play a game where everyone's always has the same potential, and that the way they succeed makes them unique, not the way they complete the dungeon as is. So that goes with the best in slot mentality. That goes with master dungeons, firm belief in specific types of ways to do things, and they're always prescribed by the legacy group. The more a singular group agrees and determines what is the route of success, the less and less likely a live service game is going to survive. That's just my two cents. It's a trade-off. It promotes hardcore gaming. It promotes friendship, like really blood brothers, blood, sweat, and tears mentality. It does not promote live service models. Because you're asking people who want to do something when they're constantly reminded that the things they want to do is hidden behind a gate. One gate is to have friends who know how to play this game a very, very long time, and you're just starting the game. And then you have to have just the right friends who are willing to do things to complement you. So all the best gear is hidden behind this requirement, not for a live service person. How do you get a person to start running? You ask them to run a marathon. That's what this game is doing, in my opinion. So you debate them with half measures. You're half a live service game, and the most coveted ending to this game is being an Olympic medalist. Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but when people casually run, they stop improving or stop being motivated to improve after they notice that there's a sudden leap in the end game, which in a live service model is forming habits. There's no end game to habits. You keep doing it. It makes you feel good. So now, what does this look like in this game? Well, you play it up to that point, and then every time you get on this game, you're reminded about how gate kept this game is. So eventually you leave. You quit the game. However, up to that point, it's great. And I still play that part. And I only temporarily dip into this part to bring you, like, to express the same opinion I have now. Which is, every day you get on, you look at this, and like, well, I still have to run this like 6 more times. Maybe 10 more times. It's like, but I already did it once. I'm not going to do it again. Like, all this stuff's like, yeah, you know, it's pretty neat. They have these good modifiers. It's a shame that I have to run my life into the ground to see these tools. I'll just wait for the next module where these modifiers get rotated into something else that is effectively my, I don't know, John Deere tracker, as opposed to my, I don't know what's an expensive non-John Deere tracker. Like, what I mean is, these are the expensive version of the tools. And live service models mean that when you go to a grocery store, you can at least afford all the food in that grocery store. Because then you can make food. Say you're a chef, right? All of us are chefs. We enter, it's a cooking game. Okay, well, guess what? I think we're gonna use the Cryptic's old school approach. We're gonna make certain ingredients really, really good and offer a lot of modifiers, and they can only be achieved when they're the best chef, the best type of chef that we want in the game. And they expect all the other casual chefs who wants to make great food to play and to the same tune as the best, quote unquote, the best chefs. Because if you want to really hang with the boys with your ingredients so you can make dishes, that's what you have to do. Instead of all the campaigns give you all the gear, now who can come up with the competing ideas on how to beat the boss, or have a boss design that don't only have one way of being defeated. Have a boss design that has a randomizer that has 4 different types. In fact, it's in this. Like, Cryptic has made some of these randomizers. The trials tend to have randomizers. Like, the last trial had randomizers, where the tools and the process is not... It's still prescribed because it's randomly chosen for you. However, it leads to the opportunity where if you give your players all the tools, they will constantly use the tools that they want to use. But if you limit the tools, well, if the tools aren't there, they're not going to bother. And you place them behind a wall that requires something else. No, it's kind of like saying, hey, you really suck at breathing. So I highly recommend that you run as fast as you can so that you can't breathe, right? Like, you don't have the tools to do that. Like, where do you start? Well, you don't start anywhere in this game. You just hope that you almost luck into having people that you encounter in game to band together and do that. That's a huge barrier. You can choose to do that if you want, but live service is not the way. Like, for example, one of the trade-offs, right? Like, one of the pros about this type of design is it emphasizes togetherness. It emphasizes investing in people. Those were the good old days. I still kind of believe in them when I'm out about making friends. Absolutely. It's a detraction from live service because this is a hangout spot now. Like, hangout spot for non-friends, non-strangers. So you constantly make designs that promote friends benefiting friends. What do you get in PE? Just all the strangers complaining about why it's clickbait, like it's click oriented. So all the comments reflect that. Your whenever something like gear comes up, it's like, oh yeah, I did this easy with my friends, you know, like people that I always hang out with. And then these guys would say like, oh, you know, most people already done it because they already plan on doing it and whatnot. Say, oh, that's cool. And then the next several comments is like, well, not all of us have friends, like right away. Like, I just started this game. Where do I find those people? Well, your system doesn't enrich for that. It doesn't encourage that at all. You don't ever make that transition from a live service person to a completion person. And meanwhile, all of your monetization and stuff emphasizes live service model, as in you're trying to make it so that it's incredibly accessible, but the most coveted thing in this game is inaccessible. Not only that, I mean, you might be thinking, oh man, MAKU, you're over exaggerating. It of course is accessible. Statistically, it is not. And what I mean by that is, if you try to be a stranger, right, in this game, you come in, you just finished, 9 out of 10 times you'll be rejected, predominantly based on your gated assets. And there's not enough patience for that. And I think it's reasonably so, because the game doesn't reward patience either. It reflects the culture of those people. Like, I don't blame those people, nor do I say they're not justified to feel that way. Your model emphasizes that already, so they are less likely to help people. What they gain is they have camaraderie, loyalty, togetherness. What does loyalty, camaraderie, togetherness do? It excludes any new people. Like, yeah, we're like this, we're really tight, so you have no room for new people. So you have your alliances, your guilds. These are the old hats that are carried over from old school stuff. In fact, other games, other live service games started as live service, and they still introduce alliance and guilds, but they mean so much less than just being in the game and showing off. Like, what I mean by showing off is not in the way that cliques do. It's like, oh, you won't get it. Like, my group, we own this. It's like, your group, if I go into that group, it's gonna be all your fault. You guys are just gonna carry me down. Like, why did we fail? I thought you were awesome. It's like, no. See, I never fail in my group. That's the type of, that's anti-live service. So take it or leave it. It's counterintuitive. Like, it's clashing. You can try to, I'm looking forward to what they are going to do to bridge this. Maybe, I can't imagine it psychologically right now, like the behavior. Perhaps they will hit something new and I can celebrate Cryptic finding this secret ingredient that allows one to be loyal to a fault and also welcome new people. When you are loyal, you don't welcome new people easily. So the old community is loyal. They form cliques. They love hanging out with their friends. They have no room. They generally normalize not having room for new people, because it's already hard enough to form cliques with like 5 friends. It takes a lot of effort. It's very admirable. It's super endearing. It's not good to strangers. Like, try breaking into anyone's inner circle. It's not easy. You can try really, really hard, and some people do really, really succeed in a system that gives you all the tools to do so. Neverwinter, in my opinion, right now has a developmental identity crisis. Not bad or good, it's just a obstacle that they have to figure out how to balance. It's the idea that the people they want to grow with this game, the live service model, are not given the tools to embrace the culture that they love in their game, their D&D inspired game, which is to be super loyal, super hardworking, super task oriented, completionist, 5 people failing like 90% of the time to get this one rare job. To bridge that, you have to get into that circle. You have to get into that mindset. And your entire game design is removing the tools to do that. It's really hard to get in there. So when you design a game, you have to give as many tools as possible for them to get in there in the first place. You know, you have to give them the ability to do so. Instead, you strip them of it. You dangle it in front of them. It's kind of like that thing all the way up in the air. It's like, well, I want to fly too. How do you know, all the people that can fly, they have airplanes. Oh, you want to fly? Sorry. You gotta get your plane tickets. You know, you gotta get in there somehow. So if you work really, really hard to get that plane ticket, you'll love it. Well, I mean, 90% of those people is like, nah, you can enjoy your planes. I'm going elsewhere. Some people say like, I'm halfway to the plane ticket Like, nah, that's not. I feel like I just wasted half my life waiting for that plane ticket. Let's go somewhere else. You don't have a community. A live service model is like, hey, you know, I just planted tulips next to my roses in my garden for the spring. It's like, oh, you did? I just started my watermelons and potatoes. Like, oh yeah, really? That's cool. And then, you know, when the harvest is done, it's like, hey, you want some of my watermelon and potatoes that I've been working hard on? Sweet. You want like tulips for decor or something? That's live service. Like, that's living. Your neighbors do something different than you, but they're effectively achieving the same objective. Like, their commonality is to make their lawn look very great, but in a different way. This game doesn't do that, in my opinion. It's really tough to tell people, oh yeah, well, you're gonna need this. Like, you're gonna need these first. You're gonna need these for this. And then you're gonna need this for that. And in this very specific order. Oh yeah, and also, I gotta warn you, 99.9 of the representation of this game is that you have to do a certain thing a certain way, and also you need certain gear and certain things because you can't succeed without them. Oh no, I don't care how good you are or how dedicated you are and how long you've been playing this game. You just need these things to prove yourself that you need these things to be able to prove yourself. Like, I can't trust you until you have these things. So that kind of sucks for strangers. Like, I want you to play my game. Oh, wait. Before you play my game, I need to know you're going to give my game a good review, right? Oh, okay. You're not going to give you need to play my game before you can give my game a good review? All right. That's okay. I don't really need you. That's fine. You don't have the necessary requirements. That's kind of how this feels right now. And you might be thinking I'm exaggerating, but I'm talking about pre-selection. So those people who play certain games, the idea is to pander to them to the point where they will most likely like the game already. And in this case, Neverwinter is being propped up by people who are so invested that they would do it anyways. But in order to grow, it's not those people. They are already there. In order to grow, you have to be inclusive. And it's needing to satisfy the people that are already there and growing at the same time that has led to this like mixed bag. And that's my deep cut for this. I still think generally speaking they did above average for both. The modifiers are great. The way they layered the currency it's great. It still checks the boxes for the people who want the Demon Web's Pit is a great dungeon. It seems really challenging. I only did it once on Master, and then I did a couple times on Advance. Fair enough. Run of the mill, like you have all your mechanics and then some creative choices. That's great. These things are gated. I won't be doing them enough to do so. Maybe I will do them way down the line when scaling becomes irrelevant, so I can see what the tools are like. Unless these tools get migrated to a different set that's like second-class citizen set, right? The live service set is what I'm gonna call it, instead of the completion set, right? So those things I think is approved across the board. It has quality of life that allows live service people, new live service people, to be engaged for a little bit longer. And then the end game, they get their rewards and then they make out. So their pattern of behavior stays the same. It's consistent, which is sufficient, I suppose. That's a 5 out of 10 for that type of experience, right? So how this is split is right now, most of the changes are propped up by all the live service model changes, not the old game design. The old game design is still the old game design. So it doesn't reinvent or improve in any way. It just... And if you ask veteran players, they're going to say, oh, it's just a rehash. Oh, it feels the same. And so it's like, yeah, of course it feels the same. It's supposed to provide that same consistent habit forming thing that you're used to. The moment it changes, you'll just start talking about how all the changes you hate because you have to adjust to it. Live service models is about change. It's about constantly having new tools. It's about constantly having changes that are optional, that are providing more variety for the game, not mandatorily. So this is between two identities. Most things are mandatorial, and it favors one over the other. Okay, so with that said, I had one more thing to say. I think I might have covered all this. Okay, there's one more thing about gear. So I see that they're doing this thing where they're trying to do the carrot on a stick thing again, where it's a half measure again, where you give something that is potentially coveted from a previous module in order to encourage and baby step even closer to the live service people. I'm making a distinction, but you know, some people are some people see this game as both a live service model and a completion game. However, those are super rare. Most completion people don't see this as a live service game. And then most live service games don't see this as a completion game because it's irrelevant on completion. It's up there where like, diminished returns. Live service people do not encounter diminished returns. For example, hey, if you go to school and study really hard and just go for it, you'll make a lot of money in return. Like, well, you could also go to school just enough so you can make a lot of money doing something else. Live service. There are choices. This doesn't have any choices. You either make it up there or you don't. So instead, you're going to go exactly where diminished return kicks in. So the moment you have to enter that masters, next module. Moving along. So here, what they're doing is they're dangling another carrot on a stick. In my opinion, this is intentionally, and I would say cleverly, they made ring sets, right? So this choice pack is to give you something that is incomplete. Deliberately incomplete. In order for someone to retroactively look back and complete something previously. That's fair enough. That's actually a step towards live service, actually. And what it does is it cheapens, because they're antagonistic to each other, it cheapens those who already have these things, right? So every time there's a pro live service adjustment, it's cheapening the old school model of completion. They're not in harmony with each other. I ultimately think just ripping the band-aid, in my opinion, this is like a hot take or wishful thinking, all the tools and the gears will just be campaign oriented. Everything's on the field right there. And what is given to the loyalists, the people who have friends who achieve, is bragging rights in the form of statistics, like historical statistics. Like, I'm gonna bring up my character history. You know, I'm a streamer or something, a content creator that's been here for 10 years. Look at my history. 30 master runs under 10 minutes. Right here. Here's my list. The last 10 runs. Here are my statistics. Right? That is insurmountable. That is validation that no amount of gear is gonna supersede, because that gear has to rotate. It has the developers have to power creep. They have to constantly up the ante with their gear, or just remove it completely. It will liberate your creative freedom substantially without having to bottleneck with this. And I play, or now I only play one other MMO, but 2 or 3 MMOs, they've de factoly removed the tools and just heuristically power creep the tools. They power creep the tools and they keep expanding mechanics. So all the tools are constantly power creeping up while the mechanics keep laterally expanding. And to the point where players no longer look forward to the gear in the content. They look forward to the challenge and in what way they're going to complete the challenge, which are the dungeons and the trials and all the other forms of activities they have. It's no longer here's the dialogue in Neverwinter that has been conditioned psychologically. It's not worth running this dungeon because the rewards suck. That's a sentiment that both the live service people and the loyalist community agree on. They value content based on what's at the end. And what's at the end gets power creeped all the time and rotated out. As a developer, personally, like, in my position, right, if I had this psychological pressure to, oh no, how am I going to create a better reward? How am I going to create an even more interesting thing? Well, shouldn't it just be about the content? Like, I want to create creative bosses, challenge my peeps. The reward is the incentive, right? It's the bonus you get. It's the challenge that we fall in love with games. And here you, in my opinion, while I hear all that, it's like great and whatnot, here it is. Tools that won't ever see the light of day for the vast majority of players that you're looking for to grow your game. And I'm gonna be like, let's be a little pragmatic about this. These things insignificantly affects the quality of life of those who already have access to these things. It's so insignificant because you've had to power creep and keep upping the ante to the point where now the delta between each new gear set is so tiny for the people you're making this design for compared to the people who are entering in this game. The delta is gigantic. So you've linked the polar opposite ends, not normal distribution. So normal distribution would be anywhere in the middle. You've enriched for people who are irked on both ends of the distribution for your, like, I don't know, your set piece. Like, it's almost poetically ignorant, and I almost find it humorous that when a thing drops, right, when a module is announced, they literally advertise these things on the website. The one thing that makes people not want to come back to the game, in my opinion. Like, psychologically, it is incredibly likely to disappoint both groups. So your only form of hype generation for Neverwinter on your site is to advertise what is gated. And what is gated is easily obtained by the people that this panders to, but it's only going to be like an incremental thing where they have to do bootstrap and do all this stuff only to get a slight incremental thing. And then those people who are excited about the game looks at it and it's like, well, it's irrelevant. So it's a negative reminder in both ways. It has a high rate of chance of disappointing all the players you've already have, and is a high rate of wishful thinking. Like, here's the stuff you'll never get, because we did not design any way of getting to this point, in my opinion. And that's an over-exaggeration. I think this module has been well above, because I can see the steps, in my opinion. Like, there are steps now. The steps are getting there, but it's such a huge delta in the way they're designed. If I like, designing weapons would suck in my mind, because I always have to work under the impression that I need to be able to one-dimensionally do better than my old design. So every time you release a new weapon set, it's gonna be, is it better than the old ones? Is it better than the last one? Like, do they think this is new enough, or is this too new? You're always constantly, as a developer, struggling with having to do all these things. And it comes with diminished return, because you are most likely going to disappoint all the people who have seen all these things out of like just repetition, and then all these are designed to appease that group, so therefore they don't appease any other group. So to me, every module becomes below a 5 emotionally for the bigger audience in Neverwinter. Neverwinter keeps scoring below average because it doesn't take into account their emotional investment, their psychology that they're looking for, to not be disappointed by module. That's kind of my 2 cents. I don't, to me though, it does just present a new challenge, a challenge I'm not willing to take up. So I'm not willing to do Masters, Temple of the Spider, and Demon Web's Pit, sitting here organizing. So that's on me. I can accept that. Am I the one that's giving most of your games and modules a 5 out of 10? Well, yes and no. Not in the same way. I'm giving it a 5 a lot of times because it doesn't have steps towards innovation. Not if I enjoy it or not. Like, if I am disappointed by my character not being better, or my hard-earned gear being phased out, and I pretty much know that it's gonna have to be phased out. It's a live service game. That's my last deep cut. I think just ripping wishful thinking, but my take is psychologically enable all your players and demonstrate, like, provide and invest in systems that makes them be able to showcase their performance. Performance creates player identification. It makes them want to stick out in a video game. And when you want to stick out in a video game, it becomes, quote unquote, competitive in a emotional way. It's not competitive in a non-competitive way. And what I mean by non-competitive is, okay, a live service person talks to a veteran. Well, you have this gear set, and you have people, you have legacy. How can you ever be competitive with me? You didn't start this game the same time I did. It has increasingly always been non-competitive. Neverwinter PvP, like, the mentioning, like, oh, we have friends and we PvP together. It's like, that's non-competitive environment. You are with your friends. If I'm with my friend, I don't even care if I lose all the time. I mean, that's my personal preference. Some people might say, oh, but I'm competitive with my friend. Like, it matters. We keep score. It's like, you're playing against the same opponent. It's a non-competitive environment. All the emotional baggage and like fallout and conflict of interest is reduced when you have loyalty. So this game is inherently non-competitive in any way, yet you have the biggest group, or arguably the most outspoken group, saying it is competitive. Well, they're big fishes in a small pond. And for better or for worse, it makes them feel great. And I hope they get to stay to feel great. But you have to be aware that the facts are they're not competing with anyone. But they choose to use that as a way to compare themselves with everyone else. They use it as a pre-selection. Like, oh, you're not good enough to hang with me because you didn't start 7 years ago. You're not good enough with me because you didn't complete Temple of the Spider, like Master Temple of the Spider. Oh, you don't have Masterworks. Oh, that's you better start working towards that Masterworks before you can hang with me. And that sounds incredibly reductive. However, I hate to admit that's what you see all the time. Like right now, all I see is a wall of even advanced demon webs pit with a raptor, a requirement. And a raptor requirement for specifically for a healer and a tank. Like just for the healer and the tank. That's what you create, in my opinion. You create gated look up gated community, I suppose. This is a gated community. That's generally why there are gatekeepers, right? So if I was part of the gated community, I would feel really comfortable too. I'd be great at home, sipping, you know, on a game that fills my every desire of challenge or chosen challenge, active challenges. And I know that I can always trust my friends to be up to the task of completing these things. Absolutely. That feels great. That's awesome. That's also gated. You don't meet new friends. And when when you have to change and your friends move on from the game, well, that sucks. Because good luck making new friends. So looking for friends for life is really rewarding. I agree. Like making it is balanced by the ability to make new friends too, though. So one skill is given off for the others. If you're busy being friends with your existing friends, you aren't busy practicing making new friends. This is the relationship that Neverwinter has with the live service model. The most coveted and exciting things, I would argue, in a game is having accessibility to the game. But if the accessibility of the game focuses on a tool that is non-existent, that's the barrier to getting it to being accessible, and you're not making design choices for that, well, your game is dying. And I don't mean dying in the sense that it's going to be non-profitable or it deserves to be closed or anything. It won't grow. It's unlikely to grow in a positive way. You could grow it in a negative way. And the negative way, in my opinion, is what some Nexon titles that I've played previously have done, which is, okay, well, you know what? We want the tools to be for everyone. Okay, let's all put it in the store. All right? So, if you don't have friends, $10. $10 for this weapon set. You can buy your way into the clique. So that's growing in a negative sense. So what I mean is you're gonna get negative sentiments. You're gonna cheapen the accolades and performance, but you're gonna go hands deep into live service. So if you can't beat them and get the merit, you can pay your way to it. And that's honestly fair game. The reason why that is you're supplementing it with other skills you have. And the commonality of currency is money. So I can become a successful doctor in order to make money so I can eat better food. However, the sentiments are going to be negative, right? In a game environment. So you can still actively grow and enrich for a player base that accepts that, which is not doing. Neverwinter is not doing that, obviously. It's enriching for players who choose performance and skill development over understanding the bigger picture of monetization, which is the idea that people can be successful elsewhere and use that privilege to augment what they like. So instead of seeing a person who is paying to win, they're paying forward. They're already winning. So it's really counterintuitive, and also oxymoronic, that someone who spent 10 years playing a game calls out the millionaire who succeeded in spending those 10 years being a millionaire, spending money to catch up with you in a game. You could go out into the field and become a millionaire yourself. That's fair game. But I'm not asking for people to not be understanding. So the idea is to raise that awareness. There are different perspectives on how people view success, and you can do that too. You could take all this gear and plaster it onto your storefront and say, well, how invested are you in the game? You like live service? You want this gear and you want to break into the legacy peeps? You got to pay their bill. As in, these guys have been backing us up for 10 years, right? They don't need to pay for this stuff. They've already paid in blood, sweat, and tears, and like their own money over time. How much is that worth? Well, if you want to get into their club, it's $10 for this set, because they already paid us way more than $10 in playtime, exposure, and whatnot. And you communicate that, right? So the loyalists will say, oh, but I worked so hard. It's like, don't worry. These guys, they're paying. It's your choice if you want to accept them. And also, we're making more money so we can make you more content that you can enjoy and that they can pay for. They're paying for your content. And then they're going to try their best to join you by paying to catch up. That's how much you guys are worth. They're literally trying to join you as friends by hanging with the big boys. That's another attempt, right? Otherwise, the other way to bridge this is to constantly introduce more and more live service improvements so that the gap is bridged. And I went way longer than I should in this review, and I didn't highlight a bunch of other things, but it's fine. This is a good place. I think this is the topic that embodies the current feelings and point of how I evaluate the modules and live service models. How is it going to grow the game? In my opinion, it's my unique spin on things. I mean, other people could focus on this too. It's what I choose to do. When I think about the game's mechanics, how it's monetized, what its goal is, I think about habit formation, what type of building philosophy developers have, and what the executives' lucrative business model is, right? In this way, I think that Demon Web Pit's module, with as much as I said, it's a 7 out of 10 because they went at least a very obvious direction in bridging and making live this game easily described more as a live service game first and a legacy game second. And for all the things I was highlighting, I think those are the incredible places that have open opportunity to bridge this gap even further. Relinquish the tools, invest in systems for metrics. Metrics, the other deep cut that I'm not going into, is the delta between privilege and new. Privilege and new. Reducing this delta is incredibly healthy for live service models. It means everyone can go to the grocery store and feel like they have equal opportunity, but when what they take from the grocery stores back home has infinite possibilities, like untapped potential. And that untapped potential can come out as a metric for enjoying your content. How they enjoy your content is the untapped potential. It is the life task that they need to do, but you give them all the tools. When everyone has all the tools, they have the smallest delta. They're people who have no reinforcement in being higher on a pecking order or low on a pecking order are more likely to work together, be understanding together, and work and like support each other. The higher the delta, the less likely they're going to. These people think they belong somewhere else. These people don't. And it doesn't matter if one's lower or higher. It could be flipped. They don't get along because they don't have the same circumstances, opportunities, and in a video game, that whole thing is like, it's just a game. Games are supposed to be fair. This game is not fair. It's a microcosm of elitism and novelty. So, delta, reducing the delta, it's very healthy for live service models. And the delta then can be emphasized based on performance metrics. It allows people to brag and show that they are different. So it's a combination of both worlds, in my opinion. There are 3 or 4 games that do that super well, and all the PvP games do that. Progression, merits, statistics, and everyone's on an even playing field. You can achieve this on RPG. The 3 or 4 games I'm talking about are other MMOs, not like battle royales or, competitive shooters. So, 7 out of 10, my folks. My peeps, 7 out of 10. I would say, with all that discussion and digression, it's a good job this time around.